Now that I've filled in the brats, I'm going to start to also add a little bit of value down the stem of this flower because there are hairy characteristics that need to be drawn so that they look correct. The hairs on these edges are quite small, so you probably can go in and draw in between the hairs to get the color. And I would work with a soft pencil right away, and you're really actually drawing the space between the hairs. Because I don't want to have to go back into them again and try to redraw that shape that they've created. Just remember you are drawing the shapes between the hairs and not the hairs themselves. And then after that, I will switch to a harder pencil. I'll go to the 2H and I'll start to put in a little bit more value. Now this is the outer fold for this brat. And then this entire brat will take on a little bit more value overall. And then we have another brat on the other side of this, which will also need some value. And right along the fold on this brat, I will make it a little bit darker. And then here on this edge here, again, we have tiny little hairs. To define that edge. And then on this side, fold is darker, and that will also help to bring out the value of these little hairs. So it's really important to look extremely closely at what you have in front of you. And so that's this technique that you can use to create hairs. So this last brat here that needs to be filled in is considerably darker than the two here. So I've got to put in my even tone first, and then I'm going to darken those areas that really need darkening so that especially this brat comes forward a little bit more. And even this brat has some very tiny hairs that we need to consider. I'm going to go to a softer pencil. I'm going to go to an HB. I have some very dark areas right along this brat in the front, and then this whole section here gets to be much darker. I would feather it out to a lighter spot. And this edge here, we need to make look like it has little hairs. So we're going to go in, paint the space between the hairs. You do need to be careful that you don't over-exaggerate. If things are too dark, like I think they're a little dark in here, I'm just going to take my kneaded eraser and I'm just going to tone them back a little bit. Just pick up the darkest darks. Make them a little bit more subtle. And this brat is just about done. Now if I were to squint at my reference, I would see that this darkness is about the same as just this darkness, so I can gauge against that in order to determine how far I should go with the values. And now that I have some fuzziness along this edge, I'm going to go in with my 3H pencil on my stem. I'm going to just do kind of a soft edge for that stem on the sunflower. And as you know, you want to put shadow underneath the flower and then let it come out and blend into the highlight and the coarse shadow that would be apparent on the stem with scientific lighting. Here where you have light against dark, you can just use a little bit of 4H pencil just to indicate a little bit of the hairs in the lighter areas. At this point, I filled in all of the brats to a certain extent so that I know what my values are. The next thing I'm going to work on are the leaves. The leaves should also be fairly dark. I'm going to put an overall tone in again, just as I did with the brats. You can see I've put some tone in the stem of the sunflower, and we want to make sure that the value that you have along the edge here blends in to the stem so that you don't have an outline, or you're going to have to lighten that line before you start to add value. If you have a light line already, you should be able to blend it in quite nicely. So I'm not going to do any more on the stem until I've worked on the leaves. I'm going to start again with a 3H pencil and block in my values first, and then start to put in the shading as it seems to need to be. And you can see as we put more tone into the surrounding areas, the petals start to take on some life. These are very dark leaves. So again, they will, because we've converted from color to black and white, these will have quite a bit of value to them. So I'm going to finish doing this, and then I'll show you how I add the subsequent tones. So at this point, I've put in my first layer of value. Again, it's an even tone going over the midribs and any other veins that are involved here. As you can see, I've converted our photograph to black and white, which will help to see these values a little bit more clearly. Now remember, when you do your veins, they need to be really, really thin. You want to tone up to them and just leave them as small as you can, unless it's a midrib that has quite a bit of width to it. But any secondary veins have to be very, very thin. Otherwise, they take on too much importance and create kind of a grotesque look to the leaf. So go slow, make sure they're thin, and make sure you have some contrast so you can see them. And if you get too much contrast, then just go back over them with some graphite and tone them back again. Now notice as I go darker with the pencil to define the veins, the contrast between the veins and the blade of the leaf is becoming greater. And since I still have to go much darker on these blades, I am probably going to have to tone back these veins so that they don't stand out quite as much as they seem to be starting to do. But I'm going to leave that until I'm almost finished with toning this leaf. But you can see how much difference it's making already just because of the darkness of these blades. And I keep changing the pencil. As soon as you feel that the pencil does not give you more darkness, go to a softer pencil.